All right.
Yeah? All right.
Go ahead.
Welcome back to Social Square, live on Citizen TV. This morning we're asking you, is digital media replacing traditional media, or do they both work well together? And 2243 is our SMS line. The hashtag is Daybreak. Dr. Buka, who's here with us, defined both media expressions dependent on the tools that they use. When you look at traditional media, TV, radio, print, etc. But digital media, you now have apps and podcasts and so much more as well. So let us know your thoughts on this topic, as we continue on with the program. But one of the issues that was emerging during this discussion is the issue of regulation, especially when it comes to digital media. And we're glad to have a regulator here with us in studio. Ezekiel Mutua, the CEO of the Kenya Film Classification Board, is here with us at this time. And oh,
Dr. Ezekiel.
Thank you, Trevor, for that. He's just fact-checked me.
Doctor,
thank you for joining us this morning. I don't know if you heard the question. There was a bit of back and forth between two of our speakers right behind you on how easy it is to properly regulate digital media. Is that possible in Kenya, first of all? Is that part of what you do for those who may have just sort of...
It's possible to regulate the internet.
And how effectively?
But it's a very dicey issue because I think the push is towards liberalization and freedom of expression. And I think weighing on the scale of whether you want to regulate and go to the extreme and deny people access, I think in Kenya we are more liberal. And the whole issue of ICT growth and technology does not allow us to really filter or regulate the social media or internet the way we do with the traditional media. Nevertheless, internet can be regulated. And where the interests of the child in particular are jeopardized or violated, the rights of the children are violated, I think all of us and all the jurisdictions in the world would want to protect the children and the rights of children. The issues of privacy, the issues of defamation come into fore when you're talking about content regulation. But our concern is how do we balance between freedom of expression and the ability to protect consumers, and to particularly children and vulnerable groups, from inappropriate content and harmful content online. And I think when it comes to these platforms that we have talked about, whether you're talking about online, YouTube, whether you're talking about the different platforms that are accessed by children, I think the conversation should be about empowering children with information to regulate themselves or to be able to determine when they are bullies or pedophiles are preying on them online, so that we do not become too cagey about appropriation of technology to the point where we are denying our children access. But when it comes to global practices, I was in the UK, in the UAE about 3 weeks ago, and I actually tried to attempt to log into several sites. And in the United Arab Emirates, you cannot access certain sites. They just block. They tell you the policy for online content distribution in that country do not allow you access to this particular kind of content. It's possible to regulate. And I think we are excited about appropriating technology and freedom of expression, and we are jeopardizing a lot of other rights in the process. I think sooner or later, when the excitement is over, we would need to realize that we need to regulate even the internet. So, for on good.
So what is the strategy going forward? Because there's this feeling that you're always lagging behind. There are more people, there are more players, there are more voices. How will you keep chasing them?
That's what it has been, Trevor. In liberalization of the media in this country, we are always doing catch-up. I mean, we liberalize, then we start doing the laws. And that's what I've been pushing since I was the Secretary General of KUJ. In 2001, when Amos Wako, the now Busia Senator, was the Attorney General, we had a very long conversation. And I was telling them, after the Kanu rule, when we move to the fully liberalized environment, this thing will become dangerous. So it's better to put attendant regulatory framework ahead of time, particularly to protect children, to ensure that radicalization does not take place online, that pedophiles do not prey on our children online, that bullies do not prey on our children, and that we can keep our children safe, and we can have safe spaces online for our children. Now, that's a conversation we have had with Google, and I'm very happy with what they're doing, because they have started a program they call Web Rangers, which aims at empowering children globally. with information on how to remain safe and how to identify those bullies and to be able to manage the cyberspace and protect themselves. But here in Kenya, the push is towards unregulated media space. The push is towards
that's the feedback you get.
That's a challenge we're dealing with.
I want to intervene there. Add to whatever Dr. Mutua is saying, that you see, the media, like any other profession, has got its rules and regulations that should be adhered to. And if the social influencers, the guys who are using the digital platforms,
just hold the mic close to your mouth,
would have regulated themselves.
Yeah.
They don't need a Mutuas and a communication authority to come in and regulate. Okay, just because they don't follow rules, that's why now the government want to come in and make sure that they police them.
And the Swale is right. Swale is right because the absence of self-regulation invites government, because ultimately any space that is used by the public is regulated by the government for the good of the citizens. And therefore the conversation should be, how far do we regulate? And how far do we allow people like this to develop their own codes? I think the government still has to give some guidelines. I think cyber security policies must be put in place, data protection, and privacy of individuals online. So that when you post my photo, like my sister was saying, and you use it out of context or inappropriately, there's a takedown procedure. And that procedure should not be too laborious or difficult for us to be able to get our privacy and our protection.
One thing I see, and Dr. Booker can come in on this, is that, and you can just pass the mic to her, is the issue of training. I see a lot more training needed, and it's not just journalists, maybe even content creators now need to walk into a classroom like yours and have a conversation as well. What are your thoughts on this?
I think this calls for more, in terms of training, one of the things that this points to is media literacy training, from at all levels. That needs to be embedded in all curricula. We don't have the advantage in this space, where right from primary or even high school, that media literacy is inculcated in the curriculum. But if you're going to have all these players, not just generating content but also consuming content, so I might not be a content generator as a young person, but I'm consuming that content. To what extent can I believe, or should I go by what social media is saying? Who should I believe? Who should I not believe? How do I contribute to that space? There's need for that media literacy at that very foundational level, so that then as people engage with social media or digital media in whatever form, that they have they have a certain socialization, and they understand what that would actually do for them. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that I think we also we would need to differentiate journalism from all these other
and I was actually about to ask you about that.
Yeah, because journalists are, they belong to professional associations. They have been trained. They are expected to abide by a certain code of conduct that guides whatever it is that they're doing. But what we've seen is that with the advent of the digital media, or with the technological disruption that has happened, even the roles that that then exist, even within the traditional media houses, have changed. Today, I'm sure even here at Citizen, you have social media engagement editors. Who knew that would be a role that would be important? You have analysts who look at, audience engagement online. How much are they reading? What stories are they reading? What sorts of, content is coming out there?
How long are they staying on our website?
Yeah. How long are they staying on our website? And that kind of thing. Who's sharing our content? And just trying to understand who that audience is. Yeah. The Washington Post, says, on the same floor that seats journalists, they have several engineers, who are part of their staff profile. So what this means is that I think we cannot close ourselves and say we know what we're doing and we are right.
Yeah.
It calls for looking at more players coming into that space, and then what that means is that then there is need for that media literacy, that they understand that you're coming from an engineering background, but these are the implications of content. In terms of the space that we're operating in.
Okay. I'd like to hear from Gloria and Foy, because now we're getting into your area of speciality. Do you feel like there needs to be more self-regulation?
First of all, I would like to agree with Dr. Mutua. I strongly believe that in sectors such as media, it's important for regulations to happen because it exposes people to risk. It does. But I would also like to quote Winston Churchill and say that when you regulate 10,000 regulations, when you implement 10,000 regulations, then there's a problem because you then kind of hinder people's individuality and freedom of expression. I'd also like to add, from my background in psychology, I'm a psychologist, that Dr. Buka and Ezekiel Mutua also said that it's important to educate, and I agree. It's said that when people know why something is wrong for them, they will do it. They won't do it because you told them not to do it. They will do it for their own sake, and even when you're not around, they won't look at those TV stations. And even when you're in bad terms as a parent, as a friend, as a government official, they won't look at those shows, they won't listen to that kind of music because they have been educated. They have been told that it's wrong, and it's not wrong because mom said. It's not wrong because Dr. Mutua said. It's not wrong because Uhuru Kenyatta has said. It's wrong because it will hinder your growth as a person, it will hinder your individuality.
So where does this education begin in your perspective? Because if mommy is not saying it and Dr. Ezekiel Mutua is not saying it, where do you get it from?
You can get the education from them, but if it's backed up by, if you watch this, when you're older, this will happen, it can begin from them, but also schools, and just getting them to learn the benefits of social media and also the downs of social media. I
see Dr. Ezekiel want to respond, but Foy, let's get Foy very briefly.
And I noticed that Foy really reacted when Dr. Buka spoke about separating journalism from content creation.
Yeah.
Anyone can do content creation, but journalism should be something that there's a measure of training at least.
Absolutely.
Let's.
Okay. I agree because I've done journalism. I'm a TV host, so I am part of the traditional media, but I'm also part of the digital space. So although when you go to school, you have certain merits to make you a journalist. But what has happened now is the digital platform has brought in citizen journalists. Anyone can be a journalist right now because the work of a journalist is to give information, to educate, to entertain, to do all that. And that's essentially what people on social media do. Now, the problem is, as someone who's already done journalism, I understand the rules and the regulations. I understand that there are certain things that people are looking at me and saying, if she's doing that, then it must be right. But there's someone else who gets their following or becomes an influencer because they're vocal, they're vulgar. You see,
think about things that you don't talk about in public.
Exactly, and that's what gives them the traction. Mm-hmm. Now, what I feel like we need to start doing is to, as we have all been saying, educate. If we educate the bunch of content creators and influencers that are there now, and they start acting in a certain way, then the ones who even come after us, they will know that this is the standard that has been set. You can't do X, Y, Z on social media because that's the standard that we have set. Because you will find that we'll do that, we'll be great, we will mind our words, we will do X, Y, Z. But then if the people who come after us don't have that in mind, then it's just gonna be a cycle where we leave the social media space, and people who come after us, they keep doing the same thing, they even get worse. Because honestly, that's how things are right now. The younger content creators are very vocal with what they are saying. They are very vocal.
They're very vocal.
They're very vocal.
Before Dr. Mutua talks,
and actually, also Michael want to come.
yes, I think the media in Kenya is on a sick bed.
It's on a sick bed.
It's on a sick bed. What I mean, yes. What I mean is, you see, you can't have anybody just waking up in the morning and using their social media platforms and post anything they want on whatever, and you see, you believe that you will become a journalist. No, I said here earlier that journalism, like any other profession, has got its rules and regulations. that have to be followed. Yeah, you don't just do anything else and you become a journalist. No way. Yeah, and that's where we go wrong in our media. That's what I'm saying. The media in Kenya is on a sickbed. You can't have comedians becoming radio presenters. You can't have comedians becoming television host shows. Yeah, there must be trained. Yeah, Dr. Buka is here. He's a media trainer. Yeah, you don't have anybody behind the mic and we call them journalists. No, it's wrong.
Okay, he has made his point. Okay. Yeah, okay.
Your point will be lost.
So where do, okay, democracy. So your point will be lost.
Yeah, because
and Michael and Eric.
And Trevor, it's really a great day for me when I see the practitioners themselves talking sense about regulation and the need for us to get that space and to have some levels of professionalism within even the internet usage so that we are all safe. Because the question we need to ask ourselves is, what is the internet for? What do we need to use technology for? Because if it is not for the wider good of society, then it's not good for us.
Who determines what the wider good of society is?
Exactly. Do you want me to be truthful?
Yes.
It is the people through their governments. People go to elections every 5 years, elect policymakers, or people make laws for them in all circles of life. We are governed by laws. We are a decent society. And decent societies agree on rules of engagement and how they want to be governed.
So they delegate that responsibility to their government.
They do, because that's why members of parliament will make laws. Right now, as we speak, we're in the process of amending the Films and Stage Plays Act Cap 222. I was just reading a brief that has just come from the Kenya Law Reform Commission, even on this subject that we're discussing. How do we regulate online videos and content that is posted online? Because for far too long, Kenya Film Classification Board was focused on cinematographic films, then came digital migration, new TV platforms came in, and the challenge of media evolution catches up with us all the time. And that's why I'm grateful that the young ladies who are involved in the internet and who are using social media in terms of creating businesses and influencing are also understanding the need for us to have some sort of a code of regulation or self-regulation that will help them to have standards.
I see her shaking her head.
Yeah, you know that because the challenge has been, we are using social media for hype, and I said the excitement makes everybody want to trade for the wrong reasons. And you look for what, you ask yourself, some of these things that are being said, because I've even seen stories about myself, 10 things you didn't know about Ezekiel Mutua, and number 7 will shock you. Then you are curious to go and check number 7.
You are curious to see,
only to see that it says you are married with 2 children, and there is nothing new. But the whole idea is about hype. It's about hype. It's about trading. It's about attracting traffic.
Okay.
But when that is said and done,
yes,
we need to have standards. We need to use the internet for the good of society. And self-regulation is critical.
Dr. Buka is itching to weigh in, and Mike and Eric will come into you as well.
Yeah. I think it cannot be a free-for-all. There's a point at which regulation must come in. Particularly when you look at the effects, of media on society. There has to be a point where regulation checks in. And, we can argue about when does that start. But we cannot wish away regulation. Just going back to something that Swale mentioned is that I think we need to be careful about, even defining who a journalist is, okay, or what journalism is. Not everybody who goes onto that, uses social media or the digital media platforms is a journalist. Okay. What we need to be aware of is that whereas traditionally the person who had the greatest say, okay, was the journalist, and families rounded around a TV set at 7 o'clock or at 9, and when Mike delivered the news, it was Mike has said, KTN has said, so it's true. Okay, we now have more players, and that's what we need to be able to accept, and that's why that training, that media literacy, needs to be important. Because if you're going to share anything, even you as Trevor, you go onto Facebook and you post something. You're going to influence a certain audience. There are people who will, one of the things that I like doing is when something has been posted, I don't just read the post, I also go to the comments, just to see what are people saying. When Safaricom unveiled the new CEO yesterday, it was not just enough to know who this person was. It was, I wanted to go and find out what do people think. Is there anybody out there who knows much more about this person other than just the fact that this is what he's been doing
beyond the press release.
And what I liked is that there are people who even went to look at some of this areas where he's been covered. Jackson Biko has interviewed him before, and that was shared. There was so much. There were links that were shared. There was so much information that I got that when I look at the paper today, it doesn't have the same effect. I already know. I went to bed knowing what I needed to know, and that's the reality. So the question for us then, as the legacy media, is how do we play different? Don't come with a headline that this is the new CEO.
Behold.
We already know what that is. Spend some more time investing in what are the things that people would need to know. Share with us some data. What has been, this person's role in the different places that they have been? How have they been able to succeed? How have they broken into some of those markets, where they have worked? And what does this mean, if they came in as a CEO for Safaricom? That calls for investment.
Yeah.
It calls for a lot more investigation. It calls for interrogation. It calls for bringing in fact checkers and all these other people, so that then you have a more in-depth story as opposed to just having a headline. Okay. Whether we are willing to invest as the legacy media is something we need to talk about.
Let's bring in Mike on this. Mike, you've been quiet, and Dr. Buka has brought in a very interesting perspective. How do we play different?
I'll say one thing, because a lot has been said. I'll say one thing to that and reiterate research. That you have to have the background information. And then the more research you have, the more information you have over and beyond what's at the surface that's available to everyone, then you can present different perspectives, views, insights. My humble opinion is that that's where it lies for traditional media.
Yeah.
The more you go into research, the more ability you'll give the Trevors and the Waihigas to be able to do things on air that are ahead of what Glory is doing online. Yeah.
Michael, let me ask you this. There's a global trend, and this year I've had the chance to speak to journalists from all around the world, and many of them confessed to me that when they began the conversation with older journalists about studying journalism, some of them were dissuaded from doing so. They were told a journalist is an expert first in a particular subject matter before they are a journalist. Some of them were told, go and do economics. Then you can do your 6-month diploma. Go and do medicine. Then you can do your 6-month diploma. What are your thoughts about that? Because Swale is saying we need journalists, people who've gone for 4 years to your media school and studied, but there's a global trend now where people are saying being a journalist alone is not enough. What are you an expert in? Was that the case, when you were actively practicing? And what are your thoughts about that?
I need to be careful here. Remember, I introduced myself as a media practitioner. One, I'm a counseling psychologist by training. And now,
by training,
and now an executive leadership coach also. That's what, if I have to bring papers, I can bring papers academically. My media practice, I was invited, or not invited, I applied for work. And thank God I was taken on, because I needed to do my master's, and I used the most available skill to me at the moment, and it was reading news on radio. After 6 months, I was heading the news department.
6 months.
I'm waiting for a shriek from you.
Swale is not amused.
I was heading the news department, but as a result of very thorough training on the job by people who I cannot go without recognizing, who trained me those 6 months. It included being taken to KTN at that time, shadowing people there, understanding the new system there, and my own editor training me day in, day out to understand what this is all about. So I might have not gotten a formal training as a journalist, but I did come in as a psychologist, and later on now trained as a counseling psychologist. What you say is what I actually also have mentioned to a few individuals, and it comes off the back of what I just said about research. You see, if you want to bring something new to the traditional media, it has to come new from an area that you can talk as an expert then. And what could that be? I think I like the trend that I'm seeing. Now you have people who are doctors who have the gift also and ability to host, then coming in to host a medical show. Now, that cuts a lot of hard work, in quotes, because when I came into media, I had to be an expert in everything as a journalist. You know, one day you start the day with a fire. Then
firefighter of sorts.
Yes. Then you go to Parliament for the budget, the release of budget. Then there's a protest because of what has been released. So you're standing on polls and reporting about that. And then at the end of the day, you're welcome to the budget analysis cocktail. And you've been exposed to this whole thing right through the day. And in parliamentary procedure requires some sort of understanding. Oh, I didn't add going to court. Now that's the, I don't know if any of you have gone to court to cover court proceedings. You need to understand what happens there. Now, if a lawyer was covering, some stories in court, knowing and understanding, they wouldn't have to jump as many hurdles, is all I'm saying. I want to chime in, especially as a psychologist and now a media practitioner, into the whole issue of trying to regulate the digital space.
Okay, and just raise your mic as you continue.
Sorry. Trying to regulate the digital space. We used to say what we did in media was because the audience wants it.
Yeah.
Ezekiel, is that true?
Now.
Absolutely.
The audience, well, that's why we put these things on. And it still sort of persists. We're looking for the audience and we do what we really believe the audience wants. Then we couldn't quite prove it. But today, my honest belief is that digital media is a community. And it's growing as a community as a reflection of the people in that community. So if we have bad behavior in the digital space, it's because we have bad behavior in that community, which is bad behavior in that population. These are the things that we really do uphold. So therein lies a problem. Yeah. Now, if you come and say, like the UAE, no more, we'll find other ways.
Okay,
we'll find other ways.
That's a good place to take a mic. The director is really saying we need to take that break. Eric, we need to hear your voice. I know there's a response at the back as well from Foy as well. Let's take that break quickly. Yeah. So much to say here right now, and we want to give them all a chance to do so. Oh, we have some tweets? Okay, right. Well, it's a digital conversation. We need to see what people are saying out there.
Engineer Lazaro says traditional media must now chart new approach to the challenges coming from the digital one. They must now change from their old methods of delaying news that's already in the public domain. There's really competition from the untrained fellas.
Swale, why are you delaying news? That's what they're asking there.
Lazaro is saying.
Isaac Muthusi says, media magnifies your marketing message. It allows you to tell people about your products and services. The best media for your marketing goals will depend on you, your ideal target audience, your budget, and products or services that you are promoting. Okay.
All right, let's see. D1Ina says, many aspects of our lives today are bound to follow organic evolutionary path. Technology takes a center stage in driving this, while intransigent conservatism, helps conserve and pass on knowledge across generations. I do believe this evolution is inevitable.
And I think Michael was alluding to that just before that break. Governor 254 says, the reality in Kenya today is that the majority of news and information we consume is largely driven around social media. This means that both formal and informal news content is being discovered via social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter.
All right, let's see what you're saying on SMSs. That's 22422 is the SMS line. Just tell us your name and where you're texting from. Like Abel from Eldoret says, traditional media is here to stay. The reason being it is trustworthy, unlike, say, a Facebook update. At times, the language on digital is offensive.
I'll be keen to see the difference between feedback on Twitter and feedback on 22422. Now, Mutembe Wankone from Meru says, traditional media is monologue and limited. We need not be rigid. We need to change and move with technology and the moving world. We need to move from traditional to digital appropriately if we have to be up to date. Babu asalimike.
Shout out to Babu there. Comment from Eldoret says, apart from speed, the essence of communication is the accuracy achieved. Recently, Third Way Alliance, the proponents of Punguza Mizigo initiative, managed to achieve the over 1 million signatures of registered voters as required by IEBC through use of digital tools. However, there are voters who have gone to court to challenge the accuracy of this. The two should complement each other, even as stakeholders work on accuracy issues.
Okay, regulation coming up. The last one, Aman Mandango says, many people get first-hand news from the digital media long before they appear on TV. It's a reliable source of information.
All right. And on that note, we're taking a quick break. We'll be back with closing remarks in as much as there's a lot to say about this. Yeah. See you in just a bit.